Hi everyone, this is the second part of Spring Security implementation video series. If you missed part 1, no worries. We covered how to add Maven dependency in pom.xml, then used default username and password to access the REST API. Then there is a scenario where we want to customize the username and password, so we did it using application.properties file and we customized the default username and password. Then we added custom security configuration because of we want to whitelist few URLs, and then we want to add multiple users instead of one user in the application. So we achieved these two functionalities using custom security configuration. Make sure to check it out. I will link it up in the description below. We are taking it a step further and diving into password encoding and role based access control today. This is where Spring Security really gets exciting and hands on. So grab a notebook, open your IDE, and let's level up your security skills. Alright, before we dive in, I have a challenge for you. By the end of this video, try implementing we discussed today and share your experience in the comment box. We left here in the first part of the video in the security configuration. So see here we given the password of the users, and before password we used this loop. So loop is used when there is no password encoding we used, but this is not the recommended way. So we have to always use password encoding when we are using Spring Security. In order to use the password encoding, use @bean and provide custom initialization of password encoder, and from here we can return any password encoding. So here we are returning and using bcrypt. Import the required classes. So once we auto wired here and provide the customized auto wiring, then we can use encoding here in the password, like invoke a method and use a method of password encoder encode. Similarly here, so this is a simple way how to use password encoding. Just provide custom initialization of password encoder and then use encode method of bcrypt password encoder class to encode the password. So now use breakpoint here and run your application in debug mode to see the encoded password. So here we can see, so this is the encoding. So now our password is not in the plain text, it is encoded one and also recommended one by the Spring Security. We have discussed password encoding. Now save the changes and execute the application. So this is the API we developed. Now let's discuss the next point, which is role-based authentication. See carefully, under employee controller, we have 4 APIs, to get and to post. First three, one is list employee, add employee, and send mail. These are the secured endpoints, whereas about us is a public endpoint. So further, I want to implement role-based authentication on these first three restricted APIs. So what I want in this application, there will be two roles. One is admin and second is manager. What I want, this add employee power should only have admin. Only admin can add the employees, and rest of the two functionalities, list employee and send mail, it can be under manager. Let's update the custom security configuration and implement the role-based authentication. Now here we have two users. One is user 1 and second is user 2. Let's assign the role to user 1 and user 2. So use here a roles method and provide the role, like user 1 is of type admin and user 2 is of type manager. So again repeating, specify the role to the user by using method roles, like user 1 is having role admin and user 2 is having a role manager. Till now we assigned roles to each user. We have two user 1 and user 2. User 1 is having a role admin and user 2 is having a role manager. Now save these changes and execute the application. To implement role based authentication, there are two things we need to set up in the custom security configuration class. One is we need to assign role to each user, like user 1 has role admin and user 2 has a role manager. Now second thing, we need to disable CSRF. How we can disable it? So this is a way how we can disable CSRF. And second change we need here, we have to specify a request matcher which will point to post endpoint of employee, and we need to specify which role or which user can access this. So for this, use request matcher and specify HTTP method of the endpoint. It is post and the endpoint is employee. Who can access it? Specify using has role, and only admin can access it. Make sure the spelling of admin here must match with the spelling we used while assigning the role to the user. So directly using the text is not the recommended way. So we have to use enums instead of direct text or direct string. But for simplicity, just to understand, we are using string directly here. So that's it. These are the changes required. Repeating once again, specify the role to the user, number 1. Number 2, disable the CSRF. And number 3, specify that which endpoint is accessible to which type of user only. So using request matcher, we specified this endpoint of type post and only admin can access, and it is specified through has role method. So that's it. These are the two changes we need. Save the changes, execute the application, and using Postman, try these changes. So here, this is a employee endpoint of type post, and here let's try to add a new user like Mandeep having department.net, and in the authorization use basic authentication, and first try with user 1. So user 1, if you go to configuration, user 1 is having a role admin and this endpoint is allowed to admin. That's why this user 1 is able to add the employee. Let's change the credential of user 2 and change some values here, like, and try with user 2 credentials. So it's saying forbidden, means unauthorized access. User 2 having role manager, and this endpoint employee of type post is only accessible and allowed to access by the admin. So here user 2 is manager, that's why we are getting the error here, and user 2 is not able to add the employee. This is all about how we can configure and set up role based access.